In this lecture, we're going to be unwrapping objects with a symmetrical approach. And to do that, we're going to need some symmetrical objects. Fortunately, the Extra Objects add-on has just the thing. So I'm going to be creating a pyramid and a gem. And we're going to unwrap both of those in this lecture. So just as a reminder, I'm going to show you quickly how to install the Extra Objects. If you haven't already, go to User Preferences, go over to the Add-ons tab. In the search, type Extra. You'll see at least 2 search results. What we're looking for is Add Mesh Extra Objects, not the curve. We want the mesh. Make sure you put a check mark inside the box and then save user settings and close the window. Now the next time you add a mesh, you should see all this stuff below the monkey. This is all the extra objects. For this lecture, we're going to be using the step pyramid and then the gem. So that's where they are. Let's start with a step pyramid. I'm going to just scroll down here and configure this so that it has 5 sides. So it's still symmetrical, but it's an odd number of sides. That's going to make it a little bit more challenging to unwrap. Okay, let's jump into edit mode and get started. With the face selection tool, I'm going to start by selecting the bottom and the top face. And the reason why I'm doing this is because these 2 faces are different than the rest of the geometry here, and I want this to be symmetrical. So I'm just going to delete these faces for now and rebuild them using the edge selection tool. Loop select this and basically just extrude, scale, 0, enter, and repeat the same thing on the top here. Loop select, extrude, scale, 0, enter. So what I've done is basically extruded that edge and brought everything down to a 0 point so that it all met together in the center. The problem right now is we actually have some doubles. So I'm going to select all and remove doubles. You'll see that it removed 8 vertices. So there were 5 vertices on top, now there's 1. And there were 5 vertices on the bottom, now there's 1. So it removed 8 out of 10 vertices. Now we have a very symmetrical looking pyramid. Let's go ahead and select all of these edges all the way around the pyramid. This is what I mean by a symmetrical approach. I've taken this object, which is basically a symmetrical object. I improved the geometry, making it more symmetrical. And now I'm basically going to divide it up into these islands so that I can paint on each little segment in its own little UV island. So let's go ahead and mark seams. Jump over to the UV editing window. Let's zoom in, select all, and unwrap. So as you can see, we ended up with 5 symmetrical islands, and all I really need to do is set the orientation so that they're going in the same direction as the pyramid. This is just a visual thing to help me as I'm painting so that I know which side is up. So as you can see, the small triangle is the top, and the big triangle is the bottom. And what I want to do is use the island selection tool and select these 2 islands because these 2 are turned sideways, rotate them on the 90-degree angle, and I'm going to push negative on the numeric keypad so that they go in the opposite direction and hit enter. So now those are in the right orientation. These are both upside down, so I'm going to flip both of those at the same time, rotate 180 degrees, enter. Now everything is facing in the right direction. You could at this point decide to either line everything up so that you can paint on everything individually, or if you want, you could stack them all together in one UV island and paint on just one island, and it would affect all the sides. So they would all have exactly the same painting on them, but you would only have to paint on it once. And unless there's any reason not to do that, that's the way I prefer to do things. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my vertex snapping, turn on the magnet, grab one of these islands and snap it together, and just repeat with the other islands. Now that we've brought all the islands together and they're all together in one UV space, let's turn off our vertex snapping. A lot of times if I leave the vertex snapping on, funny things end up happening, and if too much time goes by, I won't remember that the vertex snapping is on, and I won't be able to figure out what the problem is. Sometimes it actually feels like Blender is broken because things move in such an awkward manner. So that's why you constantly hear me say, turn that on, turn that off, turn this on, turn that off, because I know that if these things are left on, they're going to cause problems. So now I'm going to go ahead and select all of them, and you'll notice with the island selection tool on, I should be able to right click on that and select everything all at once. Go ahead and grab it, scale it, whatever you want to do. Let's go ahead and see what this looks like with a texture on it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a UV grid, and let's put this together and hit OK. Also want to check stretching, so let's go ahead and turn on the property sheet here and check the stretch. And you should see no stretching on this particular object. It's always a good idea to check. I'm kind of curious what the checkerboard pattern looks like on this, so let's go turn our texture on. As you can see, everything lays out really nice. If you do paint on it this way, it comes at the cost of everything looking exactly the same as you go around. But again, you have the choice of separating all these islands and painting on them individually as well. Let's go back to the default window. Go back to object mode. I think I'm going to do this in another layer and create our gem. So Shift A to bring up the add new mesh. Go to extras, diamonds, and gem. Now if you have your backface culling turned on, you should see the top of the gem has been removed or it looks invisible. Actually, it's a backface culling issue, and all you really need to do is make sure that your backface culling is turned on under shading. And let's go to edit mode. We want to fix those flipped normals. So I'm using my face selection. I'm going to select the affected faces, those faces right there. Now you can always hit Control F to get to the faces menu, and you can click on flip normals. Or another tip is you can hit Control N. And I want to show you something about Control N that's pretty cool. First of all, it will flip those normals. Let me undo that. Second of all, you don't have to select just those faces. You could select the entire object in Control N, and it will fix only the normals that need to be facing outwards. So it's another very useful tip right there. So now that the normals are flipped, let's get back to our project here. The symmetrical approach usually involves starting from the center of the top and moving all the way to the center of the bottom in a direct line. So I'm going to use the edge selection and find a basic path. So this is pretty obvious. We're going to need one of these lines, but it might not be obvious which way to go from here. Really, it doesn't make any difference as long as you remember the path, or you can make some kind of heads or tails about what you did the first time. So all I'm going to do is start with this edge right here, which I'm going to call my 6 o'clock. So this is like the face of a clock. That's my 6 o'clock edge. And then I'm going to take a right and a left and a right and a left, and I've arrived at the bottom. So all I have to do is remember 6 o'clock, right, left, and that's it. Go to the next line, set it up for 6 o'clock, and do the same thing. Right, left, bottom. The next edge, 6 o'clock, right, left, bottom. And just repeat over and over again until you get all the way around this whole shape. Pretty redundant because there's so many edges to do, but once you're all done, you'll have all of the edges selected in a very symmetrical approach, and you'll be able to unwrap this thing just like we did with the pyramid steps. And now you can see that everything is symmetrically selected. So I'm going to go ahead and mark those as seams. Let's jump over to the UV editing window, select all, and unwrap. So the same exact thing with our pyramid steps. You could decide at this point whether to leave them all separate islands or to stack them all together. I prefer to stack them because it's less painting, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, now that they're joined together, let's remember to turn our vertex snapping off and the magnet so that we don't run into any problems with that tool later. I'm going to go ahead and lasso select this and get it into the center, maybe scale it up, maybe move it off to the side or the corner or whatever. I don't think it really needs to be that big. You might combine this with other objects in another atlas or something like that. But for the most part, we're done. The only other thing I want to point out about this object is this. You're probably going to want to figure out where the seams and where the folds are. So when you're painting on this, you need to have some idea, are you painting over a fold or are you painting over a seam? If you're painting over a seam, you're going to want to make the texture around there kind of repeatable. So it doesn't matter what's on this side or that side, it'll look good no matter where it connects. That's basically the rule of thumb when painting across the seam. Keep the texture detail low around the seams. But if you're painting across a fold, like this is a fold right here, this is the equivalent line on the 2D side, then you can paint any amount of texture detail across these folds, no problem. You could put veins or lines or any details. You could write your name across this if you wanted to. As long as it's over the folds, you're not going to have any problems. It's only the seams where you have to kind of concern yourself with this low texture detail. So just keep that in mind while you're painting. Of course, if you were using Blender's texture paint mode, you wouldn't have to worry about any of that at all. But if you're painting this with a 2D image editing software like Photoshop, then of course that is going to be an issue. So that's what I call the symmetrical approach. And you'll hear me say that from time to time. Later on in the course, I'll refer back to this lecture and I'll say something about a pyramid step or the symmetrical approach or whatever. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. So what you can do to get a better handle on this is go ahead and create your own pyramid step. I would definitely work with the gem. I think it's fairly challenging to unwrap this piece. And I probably make it look easy, but it takes a little bit of finesse to be able to understand where you're at inside of that. And maybe, work with some of the other objects that are in the extra objects add-on. I think you could probably get away with creating other types of diamonds. I haven't tried yet, but let's see what happens if you go ahead and create a brilliant diamond. That's a symmetrical object. Or, look around. You'll find that there's a lot of symmetry in nature, and you probably have models in your own collection that are symmetrical. So if you come up with anything cool or have any questions about this lecture, be sure to use the discussions, and I'll be sure to leave you some feedback or help answer those questions. So have fun, good luck, and I'll see you in the next one.